For many intermediate chess players, one of their main goals is to reach 2000. Whether that be FIDE for over-the-board players or chess.com rapid grading for online enthusiasts. And I'd say it's very realistic and might even take much less time than you might expect, if you do the right things. Me personally, I plateaued for quite some time on 1700 Lichess Rapid and then at 1800 FIDE, but eventually I managed to break through. So today, I want to share with you the lessons that took me many years to learn so that hopefully you can make progress even faster than I did. So let's start with the openings. The number one piece of advice I'll give you here is to know the positions that you're playing. What do I mean by this? If you don't have that much experience playing chess, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to navigate many different kinds of structures and positions and know where the pieces go. So, because of that, my recommendation is you choose one and you learn it really, really well. Beyond just learning the theory and the basic lines, actually understand the positions that you want to play. What do I mean by this? When you're studying the theory, pick up on different patterns, maneuvers, themes that arise very often. The pawn structure that occurs in that position, you should know very well. For example, if you're playing the Queen's Gambit, it's very likely that you're going to encounter the Carlsbad structure a lot, which means you have to really focus on learning that in a lot of depth. That way, you're going to be more familiar with the openings that you're playing than your opponent, and you're going to have an edge when it comes to understanding what you need to do, and that way outplay them. When it comes to middle games, the cool thing is, if we followed the first step and we actually understand the openings that we chose, we're already going to have a pretty good base of knowledge for the middle games that arise out of those openings. So, the number one most important thing is tactics and calculation. And yes, you might say, yeah, we all know this, solve a lot of puzzles, it's all good, but I really cannot overvalue this piece of advice. When I was around 13 years old, I remember I played the Pan American Chess Championship under 13 years in Colombia. I was rated around 1300 and I played at 1900. I did really well. I was holding my own, I got a good position, in fact I was even slightly better, but then I just blundered a piece. And I had so many of these games where I would just make blunders and I thought, it's just bad luck, it's so obvious these tactics. But no, we have to have some humility and accept that this is also a skill that needs to be improved. And think about it, probably over 90% of the games of players rated below 2000 get decided by tactics or even just by a simple blunder. So because of this, the number one thing that you can do is make sure you blunder less and take advantage of the moments where your opponents make those mistakes. For this, of course, you can use Lichess, Chess Tempo, chess.com, pretty much any online website where you can train with puzzles, as well as a puzzle book. But the most important thing here is that you apply a specific process when you're calculating, and that is checks, captures, and threats. So let me use this position to quickly demonstrate the basics of calculation and some common mistakes that many players make. So first of all, checks, captures, and threats. We should consider all of them, and if you've built up that intuition, then you can do it very quickly. What do I mean by this? If you've been practicing this over and over and over again, then it will be much more likely that over time you'll develop this feeling that strong players have, where you don't even need to go through this process consciously. But if you're just starting out calculating and getting used to doing it seriously, then you should manually check all the checks. For example, in this case, there's queen takes f7, these moves are of course not legal, and there's rook to e8 check. So let's start with that one, rook e8. What happens after rook e8? You might think, well, we're just blundering a rook, why would we do that? But then, once we consider our next move, we need to keep doing the same thing. After rook e8, any other checks would be ridiculous. They would just blunder. After king e8, they would just blunder the queen, because no other checks are possible other than queen takes f7. Captures, no captures are possible. Threats. Aha, here we discover we have bishop g6, and we're winning the queen, and we're winning the game, right? No, because the same way we think for ourselves, we also need to think for our opponent. And an important thing is to never stop calculating too early. Why? Here, let's think about the checks for black. If you pause the video, if you want to find it, you can do that. If not, I'll tell you the answer right now. Here, black has the move rook to f2 check. And now, if we move the king, of course, we're losing the queen, and we're going to be down a rook. And if we take this, then let's consider the checks again. Knight to e4 check. And now, if we move the bishop, we're unpinning the queen, and if not, we're losing the queen anyway. but the important thing is to look for all the checks, all the captures, and all the threats in any given position and not stop calculating until the forcing moves are over. So now, we know that this move Rook E8 does not work, but it looked very interesting. So what else do we have to do? Well, if you look at all the possibilities, there's nothing better than playing Queen takes F7, and eventually this endgame, by pushing this pawn, should be winning, especially considering you're up 2 pawns in this position. Next up, endgames, and the most important thing here is that you just know the most common basic endgames that arise in chess, and I'm talking specifically about theory. For example, the basic king and pawn endgames, as well as the filator position and the rook endgames, and a few more. Why is this so important? Not only will it help you when you actually get those positions on the board, but it will also help you to be able to make decisions previously to those moments. What do I mean? For example, if you're down a pawn in an endgame, it will be useful to know that if you trade into a rook endgame, you might be able to save a draw because you know how to defend the filator position. Next up, don't go crazy. Yeah, it sounds a little bit stupid, but I'll tell you what I mean by this. I also used to do this a lot when I was playing lower rated players. I was very scared that they will just be able to make a draw if I play normally and I don't do anything special. And I also see this a lot in my students, where very early on they try to go for some very complicated, weird operation, which just ends up losing them the game. This is not a very intelligent way to play chess, and the sound way to go is to just play logical, sound, solid moves, and your opponents will make the mistakes themselves more times than not. I'm not saying you should never be creative or anything like that, but what I am saying is that if you have less experience, it's going to be more difficult for you to understand when you can actually break the basic principles of chess and when not to. Next up, considering that you've already been doing all of the things we mentioned before, it's very important that you actually learn from your mistakes. You need to understand what aspect of all of these things that we've mentioned, or other ones as well, you're failing most at, and then be able to correct that mistake that you're making most often. Sometimes it will be very obvious if you're just blundering pieces a lot, well then you definitely need to work more on your calculation, on your tactics. But sometimes it might be that you're not finding plans in a position, or that you're struggling in endgames. It's definitely possible to do yourself with a lot of self-analysis, but definitely a useful thing you can do. If you're really serious about chess or you want to get better very quickly, then you can of course hire a coach. The coach will be able to detect what exactly you're doing wrong relatively easily, and then be able to tell you exactly what you need to do to improve. I'll use this to plug myself. If you want to work with me, then you can check out the website linked in the description, and I'll be more than happy to be your own personal chess coach. And finally, experience. Obviously, the things that I talked about in this video are just a small fraction of what the world of chess entails. You know, there's so many books that have been written, so many games that have been played, and the more time you spend, the more things you do, obviously the better you're going to get, the more you're going to learn. Just like in any venture that we engage in life. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful to you, then I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, leave a like, it really helps out the YouTube algorithm, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.